A billionaire laughed and said, "Translate this and my salary is yours." Everyone in the room laughed, except the black maid standing quietly in the corner. Seconds later, she spoke a single sentence that left the billionaire speechless. What happened next will shock you. Stay till the end. And don't forget to subscribe for stories that inspire and amaze. The morning sun poured through the tall glass windows of Coal Industries, a company known for its luxury, power, and ruthless efficiency. Inside the 27th floor conference room, a crowd of executives and investors had gathered. The air buzzed with tension, ambition, and the faint aroma of expensive coffee. At the head of the table sat Harrison Cole, a billionaire whose name commanded both fear and respect. He had built his empire from nothing, or so he claimed, and he carried his success like a badge of superiority. His laughter was loud, his confidence even louder. That morning, Harrison was preparing for a meeting with a group of international delegates from Africa. It was an important deal, one that could expand his business into new markets. But when the professional translator failed to show up, frustration spread across the room. "Unbelievable," Harrison muttered, glancing at his watch. "You pay people thousands and they can't even arrive on time." The investors chuckled, trying to match his tone. That's when one of them joked, "Maybe your cleaning staff can help." "They're always here early," laughter erupted. At the corner of the room, a woman quietly continued wiping the glass table. Amara, a black maid in her late 20s, didn't even look up. She had learned to be invisible, to clean, listen, and move on without being noticed. Her uniform was neat, her eyes calm but observant. Harrison turned to her with an amused grin. "You there," he said mockingly. "Think you can translate this?" He held up a printed page, a legal document written in an old African dialect. The room laughed again. Someone even whispered, "This should be fun." Amara paused. Slowly she straightened up and met Harrison's gaze. Her voice was soft yet steady. "If I do it," she said, "what do I get?" The laughter grew louder. Harrison leaned back in his chair, clearly entertained. "All right," he said dramatically. "If you can translate this document perfectly, my salary is yours." Phones came out. People started recording. It was entertainment for the board elite. Amara stepped forward, her expression unreadable. She took the paper from his hand, her eyes scanning the lines like a professional. Then, with absolute composure, she began to speak, word for word, in flawless translation. Not just the words, but the emotion behind them. Her tone shifted with every line, bringing the document's meaning to life. The African delegates exchanged stunned looks. One of them suddenly smiled, whispering something to another. When she finished, there was no laughter, only silence. Finally, one of the delegates stood and said, "She translated it perfectly. Every nuance, every phrase. This dialect is nearly extinct, and she speaks it as if she were born into it." The entire boardroom froze. Harrison's smirk faded into disbelief. He had humiliated her for a joke, but the joke had turned back on him. For the first time in years, his arrogance met a wall of truth. The maid, the woman everyone overlooked, had just outsmarted a room full of millionaires. Amara gently placed the paper back on the table and said quietly, "Never assume someone's worth by what they wear, sir." No one moved. No one spoke. The silence was heavier than the air itself. And that moment, that quiet sentence, would change both of their lives forever. For a long, uneasy moment, no one in the room spoke. The same people who had laughed seconds earlier now sat frozen, eyes darting between the billionaire and the maid who had just stunned them all. Harrison Cole, known for his iron confidence, felt something he hadn't felt in years: embarrassment. He cleared his throat, trying to gather his composure, but the delegates were still whispering in astonishment. The cameras that had been lifted in mockery were now filming in awe. Who are you?" Harrison finally asked, his voice lower, stripped of arrogance. Amara stood still, her hands folded in front of her apron. "Just someone who listens while she works, sir," she replied gently. The delegates smiled knowingly, but one of them leaned forward. "That's not all. Only a handful of people can speak that dialect. It's an ancient language from the southern provinces of my country," he explained. "You can't learn it unless you've studied deeply." "Or lived there," Amara nodded softly. "I lived there for many years. My father was a teacher. He taught me the language when I was a child." Everyone listened, mesmerized by the calm dignity in her voice. The woman they had ignored for months had more wisdom in her tone than the entire board combined. Harrison blinked, processing her words. "But if you're that educated, why are you working here as a maid?" he asked, the question tumbling out before he could stop himself. The room went silent again. Amara looked down, her eyes glistening for a moment. Then she said quietly, "Because sometimes life doesn't follow the path we expect. After my father passed away, I came here to study linguistics. But tuition was too high, and without connections or papers, opportunities disappeared. So I took what I could find. Cleaning isn't shameful, sir. It just doesn't define who I am." Her voice cracked slightly, but her pride didn't. The executives exchanged uncomfortable glances. A few lowered their eyes, ashamed of their earlier laughter. For the first time, Harrison didn't know how to respond. His entire career had been built on the belief that money and titles measured a person's worth. But here stood a woman who had lost everything, and still carried herself with more dignity than anyone in the room. He looked around and saw the judgment in the delegates' eyes. The African representative smiled faintly and said, "Mr. Cole, I believe you made a promise." "About your salary?" Laughter rippled gently across the table, but this time not at Amara. It was at Harrison, his cheeks flushed red. "That was just a joke," he said quickly, trying to brush it off, but Amara raised her hand slightly. "I don't want your salary, sir," she said. "I just wanted to remind everyone here that respect is worth more than any paycheck." Those words hit deeper than any translation ever could. One of the investors clapped softly, breaking the silence. Soon the delegates joined in. Even some employees in the back of the room smiled through tears. The applause wasn't for the translation. It was for her courage. Amara gave a small nod, placed the translated paper neatly back on the table, and turned to leave the room. But before she reached the door, a voice stopped her. "Amara," Harrison said quietly, his tone unrecognizable. "Please wait," she turned slowly. He stood there, no longer the arrogant billionaire, but a man suddenly aware of his own ignorance. "I was wrong," he said. "You deserve far more than this. Please come to my office after the meeting." She didn't answer. She only nodded politely and walked out. But one thing was certain. Nothing about her life would ever be the same again. The next morning, Amara arrived early at the glass towers of Cole Enterprises. She had barely slept, her mind replaying every moment from the previous day, the laughter, the silence, and the billionaire's humbled voice asking her to stay behind. For the first time, the security guard at the front desk didn't wave her through indifferently. He stood up straight and said, "Mr. Cole asked to see you as soon as you arrive." Even his tone carried respect. Amara clutched her cleaning kit nervously as she entered the executive floor. Everything gleamed. Polished marble, chrome furniture, walls lined with art that cost more than she earned in a decade. Yet today, she wasn't there to clean any of it. Harrison Cole stood by the window, overlooking the skyline. His usual confidence was gone. He looked human, almost fragile. "Amara," he said, turning toward her, "thank you for coming. I owe you an apology." She shook her head. "No apology needed, sir. You didn't know." "That's exactly the problem," he said, sighing. "I should have known. I built this company believing I understood people. But yesterday I realized I've been surrounded by voices that only echo what I want to hear. Not the truth." He paused, looking down at the papers on his desk. The same Mandarin document that had sparked everything. "You saved this company from an international scandal. The translation you did overnight exposed a section we completely misread, one that could have cost us millions and destroyed hundreds of jobs." Amara's eyes widened. "I didn't mean to," he interrupted gently. "You meant to do the right thing." "And you did." For a moment, neither spoke. Then Harrison walked toward her, holding a folder. "I want to offer you a position in our global communications department. Full salary, full benefits, and a fresh start." Amara's breath caught. She had dreamed of such an opportunity once, years ago, when her father was still alive, before life took everything away. But now that it was in front of her, Doubt clouded her thoughts. "I don't know if I belong here," she whispered. Harrison smiled slightly. "You belonged here before any of us realized it. The only difference now is that you've been seen." She blinked rapidly, trying to hold back tears. The offer meant stability, medical insurance for her mother, an escape from endless struggle. But it also came with fear of standing in a world that had mocked her, of speaking openly where she was, once invisible. "I'll think about it," she said softly. He nodded. "Take your time. But Amara, don't underestimate yourself again. Yesterday an entire boardroom witnessed your strength. Don't hide it anymore." As she left his office, people along the corridor looked up from their desks, not to ignore her, but to acknowledge her. Some even smiled. The whispers that once followed her with ridicule were now tinged with admiration. But the biggest surprise came when she reached the elevator. A young intern hurried up to her, notebook in hand. "Miss Amara," she said shyly, "I just wanted to say, thank you. My mom cleans offices too. Yesterday, when you stood up in that room, it felt like you stood up for her too." Amara froze, heart swelling. "Tell your mom she should never feel small," she replied. "Without people like her, none of this would stand." When she stepped outside into the cold morning air, sunlight reflected off the skyscrapers, and for the first time in years, she felt its warmth not just on her skin, but deep in her soul. Yet as her phone buzzed with a text from her landlord reminding her about rent, reality pulled her back. The offer was life-changing, but bills were still due, her mother still sick, and her past still unfinished. She looked back at the tower and whispered, "If I'm going to change my life, I'll do it on my own terms." The decision she was about to make would soon shake the entire company again. That night, Amara sat in her tiny apartment, the glow of the city seeping through cracked blinds. Her mother slept in the next room, an oxygen monitor blinking softly. The doctor's words from earlier still echoed in her mind. "The next treatment costs $2,200. "We can't delay it." Amara pressed her palms to her face. She had exactly $300 left after rent. Harrison's offer replayed in her thoughts, the salary, the respect, the chance to start again. But something in her heart wasn't settled. It wasn't just about the job anymore. Something about that Mandarin document still bothered her. She pulled her old laptop closer and reopened her translation notes. The characters she had rewritten from memory looked clean, but one section near the end shimmered in her mind like a red flag. Her instincts, sharpened by years of linguistic precision, whispered, "Something's hidden here." Amara zoomed in. Buried under the technical language was a subtle clause, one that could easily go unnoticed by a careless translator. Her breath quickened. It read, "Reduction of operational workforce by no less than 300 within 60 days of contract execution." Her chest tightened. "Layoffs," she murmured. "Hundreds of them." She cross-checked the original document, her father's old notes beside her. The contract's meaning had been twisted. The company planned to cut workers under the guise of restructuring. Harrison might not even know. But Willis, the head of the translation team, surely did. She remembered his sneer from that day. "You're just the help." Anger burned beneath her calm surface. She couldn't ignore this. Not when it would cost innocent people their jobs. Not when her own father had once been destroyed by corporate greed, just like this. By 3 a.m., Amara had drafted a full corrected translation, one that exposed the hidden clause and proved that the deal violated labor agreements. She didn't plan to embarrass Harrison. She wanted the truth to come out before it was too late. She printed every page, packed her notes, and tucked her father's jade pen into her coat pocket. It was the only thing she had left of him, and the one symbol that reminded her why she'd never stay silent again. At dawn, she walked into Cole Enterprises, determination in her step. But as she neared the conference room, her blood ran cold. Willis was already there, leaning against the doorway, sipping coffee, a smug smile plastered on his face. "Well, if it isn't the overnight sensation," he said mockingly. "You think a little translation trick makes you special?" "I'm just doing my job," Amara said, trying to move past him. He stepped in front of her. "Your job is cleaning floors, not meddling with billion-dollar deals." Amara met his gaze. My job, she said calmly, is telling the truth, in whatever language it's written. Willis's smirk faltered for a fraction of a second, but he quickly regained it. Careful, sweetheart. People who talk too much in this company don't last long. Before she could respond, Harrison appeared behind him. Willis, he said coldly, we'll see how long you last. Step aside. Willis stiffened but obeyed. Harrison turned to Amara. I got your email. You found something, didn't you? Amara handed him the folder. You need to read this now, before you sign anything. Harrison skimmed the first few pages, then stopped. His face darkened. This clause isn't what our team reported. I know, Amara said softly. They changed it. The air between them grew heavy. Harrison closed the folder slowly, realization dawning on his face. You just saved us again, and this time, maybe even saved hundreds of families. Willis shifted nervously in the corner, his composure crumbling. Harrison turned to him, voice low and dangerous. You knew about this, didn't you? Willis's silence said enough. Amara stood quietly, her hands trembling, not from fear, but from the weight of finally being heard. You're not just a translator, Amara, Harrison said at last. You're the reason this company still has a soul. Her father's words echoed in her heart. Words build bridges between worlds. And that morning, she realized she just rebuilt one her father thought was forever lost. But Willis wasn't done. As Amara walked out of the room, she caught his glare. Cold, vengeful, dangerous. What she didn't know was that by nightfall, he would try to destroy everything she'd worked for. By midday, Amara thought she had a small victory. Harrison had promised to delay the contract signing until the corrected translation was reviewed. She felt a flicker of hope, a chance to save her mother, the employees, and her own future. But hope can be fragile. As she returned to her workstation, her heart sank. Her laptop, the one containing every translation she had painstakingly reconstructed, was gone. The screen was black. The files she had saved over the last 48 hours had vanished. Willis leaned against the doorframe, his coffee cup in hand, fake concern plastered across his face. Accidents happen, he said lightly, his tone dripping with sarcasm. I was just making sure your files were secure, Amara froze. Her chest tightened, panic rising. Every meticulous translation, every note, every corrected clause, gone. Without that evidence, Harrison wouldn't be able to stop the contract from being signed. The layoffs would proceed. Hundreds of people, including families she had begun to care about, could lose their livelihoods. She clenched her fists around her father's jade pen. Its weight grounded her. Think, plan, don't. Panic. She remembered the emergency. Exit codes she had observed while cleaning the executive floor, a small advantage she had learned to ignore in her days of invisibility. There were cameras, yes, but they couldn't cover every angle, not in every small storage closet. If she acted quickly, she could reconstruct the critical sections from memory, using her father's journal for guidance. For the next 3 hours, she worked in near silence, hiding behind supply shelves and office partitions. Every paragraph reconstructed, every clause rewritten, every technical term double-checked. Sweat dripped from her brow. Her hands cramped, her eyes blurred, but she refused to stop. Meanwhile, Willis watched from a distance. His smile had disappeared, replaced with a simmering rage. He had underestimated her once, and now he realized the cost of that mistake. But Amara was faster, more meticulous, more dedicated. Every attempt to sabotage her was countered by her knowledge, her instinct, and her unwavering determination. By late afternoon, she had nearly completed the translation. But time was cruel. Harrison was called into a pre-meeting with the board, leaving Amara with only 1 hour to finish. She felt exhaustion clawing at her. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind, whispering encouragement. You can do this, Amara, just like your father would have. Finally, with 45 minutes left, she placed the completed translation in a sealed envelope and slid it across the desk in Harrison's office. Here, she said, her voice trembling but firm. Everything accurately reconstructed. You can stop the contract. Harrison's eyes widened as he skimmed through it. The red flags, the hidden clauses, the workforce reduction plans, the technical inconsistencies, all exposed. He glanced up at Amara, astonishment and respect mingling in his gaze. Meanwhile, Willis realized his control was slipping. The plan to ruin her, to take credit for her work, to keep her silent, all had failed. Rage flashed in his eyes. But Harrison's voice, calm and lethal, cut through the tension. "Mr. Willis," he said, his tone ice cold. "We're done here. Security will escort you out immediately," Willis sputtered, but there was no argument. Every second he hesitated, the weight of his betrayal pressed down. Amara had outmaneuvered him. She had turned sabotage into triumph. As Willis was removed, Amara allowed herself a small breath of relief, but she didn't linger. Her mother's treatment, the eviction, the lives of dozens of employees, all depended on what happened next. The clock ticked relentlessly. Minutes until the final review, seconds until the board would decide. Every heartbeat carried the tension of a life waiting to change or crumble. Amara gripped her jade pen. For the first time in years, she felt fully seen, fully capable, fully alive. Whatever happened next, she knew she had already fought harder than anyone had expected. And then the boardroom doors opened. The moment of truth had arrived. The boardroom was tense. Every executive's eyes flicked between Harrison and the sealed envelope Amara had delivered. Minutes felt like hours. She stood at the edge of the room, her jade pen in hand, the weight of her father's legacy grounding her. Harrison opened the envelope, his eyes scanning the reconstructed translation. Red flags, hidden clauses, workforce reductions, everything previously misrepresented, now clearly exposed. He looked up at Amara, astonishment mingled with respect. This is accurate," he said quietly, almost in disbelief. Whispers spread across the room. Executives who had once dismissed her as invisible now stared in shock. The cleaner, the one they overlooked every day, had just revealed the full truth. Every mistranslation, every deliberate omission by Willis was now on the table. Willis stood frozen at the edge of the room. His arrogance had evaporated, replaced with panic. "This isn't possible," he stammered. "She can't—" Harrison's voice cut through sharply. "Security, escort him out." Willis's protests were ignored as he was removed, his plans crumbling. Every attempt to undermine Amara had failed. The very people who had once belittled her now witnessed the power of her knowledge, her determination, her courage. Amara felt a rush of relief, but she didn't allow herself to relax. Her mother's medical bills, the eviction, the livelihoods of dozens of employees, none of it could wait. Harrison turned to her, a mixture of respect and calculation in his eyes. "Amara," he said, his tone measured, "you've done what none of us could. You've corrected errors that could have cost the company millions. I want you to oversee the implementation of this contract personally." Her heart soared. The board members murmured approval. Her position was no longer invisible, no longer in the shadows. She was seen, recognized, valued, and for her skill, her intelligence, and her courage. She signed the official documents, her father's jade pen glinting in the sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Every stroke carried the weight of her family's struggles, her sacrifices, and the countless hours she had labored unseen. Harrison handed her a check, $2,700, equivalent to his daily salary. But that wasn't all. The company also issued a $50,000 signing bonus for her expertise in cultural and technical liaison work. For the first time, she felt the tangible reward of her brilliance, enough to pay for her mother's care, stop the eviction, and secure a future that once seemed impossible. 6 months later, Amara sat in her own office, overlooking the city where she had once felt invisible. The cleaning cart replaced by a polished desk, her mother receiving proper medical care, and employees who had once ignored her now looked her in the eye with respect. She had not only saved her family, but had changed the company culture. Employees at every level were encouraged to showcase their hidden talents, to be seen, to be heard. The janitor who spoke 5 languages, the IT technician with a hidden engineering gift, now all had opportunities to shine. Her father's jade pen rested in a crystal stand on her desk, no longer a talisman of loss, but a symbol of authority, knowledge, and heritage. The scent of sandalwood reminded her of his lessons, his love, and his belief that words could build bridges between worlds. Amara had transformed invisibility into power, humiliation into triumph, fear into courage, and as she prepared for her first boardroom presentation on international expansion, she smiled. This was more than a personal victory. It was proof that potential, when recognized, can change lives, uplift communities, and rewrite destinies. Have you ever been underestimated? Have you ever hidden your true potential because the world wouldn't see it? Share your story in the comments. Your breakthrough could be closer than you think. Subscribe to our channel to discover more inspiring stories of hidden talent, courage, and life-changing victories. Hit the like button if you believe everyone has untapped potential, and ring the notification bell so you never miss a story that might just change your life.